Kakarot.
Huh? Kakarot? What does that mean? Is that a vegetable? I hate vegetables!
Kakarot!
What the heck's a Kakarot?
Yeah, I think most Dragon Ball fans have heard that one before. Kakarot carrot. And I'm pretty sure another common one is that most Saiyans are named after vegetables. However, I think few fans actually know the extent that name puns and theme naming have on the Dragon Ball universe. Many characters, no matter how minor, actually have some sort of theme name or a name pun. Something that Toriyama has done since the beginning. But to dive in deeper, hello there everybody, I'm Blackenfist, and welcome to the Birds and the Bees of Dragon Ball. Today I'm going to be talking about something very essential to Dragon Ball, which is the name puns and theme naming, which is a lot more extensive than just the Saiyans, and something that he has been doing since before the Saiyans, ever since the beginning of Dragon Ball. It's something Toriyama has decided to do since the beginning and has continued to do so even with the Battle of Gods movie. Now, of course, many of these puns and many of these theme names and whatever are not in English. A lot of these puns are actually in Japanese and occasionally even Chinese. I don't speak either of those languages, so I might just keep in mind I might be butchering the pronunciation of these names. So just to keep in mind, my pronunciation is definitely not going to be perfect. But name puns has definitely been something that Toriyama has employed since the beginning, very beginning of Dragon Ball. One of his first villains, Mai and Shu, are actually a name pun on a Chinese dumpling called Mai Shu. Of course, Shu's name was not Shu at the time, it was Soba, but that's a previous episode.
What better place to start than Goku himself, the protagonist of Dragon Ball? We've already discussed his Saiyan name Kakarot and its connection to the English word carrot. However, his Earth name Goku also has an interesting origin. As we all know, the first arc of Dragon Ball was loosely based on the story Journey to the West, and in that story there was a character named Sun Wukong. This is pretty much Goku's name. Goku is just the Japanese pronunciation of the Chinese name Sun Wukong. And while we're on the subject of Saiyans like Goku, we already know that Saiyans are named after vegetables. But the word Saiyan also has a connection to the word vegetable. Two very important things should be noted before continuing. In the Japanese dub, Saiyan is pronounced Saya, like Saiyajin. And the Japanese word for vegetable is Yase. Now, Toriyama got the word Saya from the Japanese word for vegetable, and the way he got this is by rearranging the syllables of the word Yase, creating the word Saya. And while we're talking about Saiyans, why not start with the Prince of all Saiyans? Vegeta gets his name actually fairly simply from the first 6 letters of the English word vegetable. Broly is another obvious one. Broly obviously is a name pun on the English word for broccoli. Another obvious one, I think, is Goku's long-haired, evil, long-lost brother Raditz. We get his name from the English word for radish. And while we're on the subject of Goku's relatives, his father Bardock is actually a name pun on the Japanese word for badaku, a Japanese root vegetable. Of course, it's not only the Saiyans that have these name puns and theme names. Piccolo, another prominent character, is of course a name pun on the musical instrument piccolo. And when his father, Demon King Piccolo, gave birth to all the mutated Namekians, they were also named after musical instruments, and of course got their own name puns, fairly obvious ones. Of course, we have drum, piano, those are the 2 most obvious, and we also have tambourine and cymbal, all named after musical instruments. Interestingly enough, Toriyama did not decide to name the other Namekians in the series after musical instruments. Kami is literally the Japanese word for God, and all the other Namekians have some sort of name pun to the word snail. Murray, a elder Namekian that we see in the series, gets his name from the Japanese word katatsamuri, which is the Japanese word for snail. Of course, he only gets his name from the second half of the word. Another more prominent character, Dende, gets his name from the Japanese word Denden Mushi, which is just another Japanese word for snail. Dende's older brother, Cargo, although only appearing for a short time, also had a connection to the word snail, but this time to the French word for snail, which is escargot. And of course, one of the most obvious name puns is nail, obviously a pun on the English word for nail. Just kidding, it's just the last 4 letters of the English word for snail. And of course, in the Dragon Ball universe, the villains also get their own fair share of name puns. Frieza, one of the more prominent Dragon Ball villains, is of course a name pun on the English word for freezer. And his older brother, although not being canon to the manga, received the same treatment. His name pun, of course, a name pun on the English word cooler. How obvious. In the Majin Buu arc, the theme name was spells, or things that sounded like spells. The more famous one is obviously the reference to the Disney movie Cinderella, quite literally Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo. Pretty self-explanatory. There's also, of course, less well-known ones, like Deborah, his name coming from the word abracadabra, the second half of that word, of course. Pui Pui, one of Babadi's grunts, gets his name from the Japanese word Chin Chin Pui Pui, which pretty much could be translated into hocus pocus. And this is exactly what Viz did. Pui Pui's name in the Viz version of the manga is Pocus. And of course, how could I do this video without mentioning any of the human Dragon Ball characters, more specifically Bulma and her family. Bulma's name is a name pun on the English word for bloomers. This pretty much set up how Toriyama would name the rest of Bulma's relatives. The theme name for Bulma's family, of course, is undergarments. Bulma's father, Dr. Brief, is of course a name pun on the English word for briefs. Her son, Trunks, of course, is a name pun on the word trunks. And even her daughter, Bra, is of course another obvious name pun on a woman's undergarment. Krillin, another prominent human in Dragon Ball, gets his name from the word cure. Now keep in mind, in the Japanese version, Krillin's name is pronounced Kuririn, and the first part of his name comes from the Japanese word for chestnut, which is cure. Interestingly, Toriyama also named Krillin's daughter Marin after a French word for chestnut. And of course, guys, there's many more. The fact that Jackie Chan's alter ego Jackie Chun is a name pun on the actor Jackie Chan. Goku's wife Chi-Chi is a name pun on milk or breasts, as some like to say. And the entire Red Ribbon Army has a theme name of characters being named after a certain color. Some more obvious than others.
But of course, guys, there was no way that I was going to be able to go through every single name pun. As I've said before, the amount of name puns in Dragon Ball is huge. It looks like most characters employ a name pun, so there was no way I was going to get to them all. I just wanted you to get a sense of some of the more important name puns, and of course, the sheer significance of name puns in Dragon Ball, considering the fact this is something Toriyama has done since the beginning, and something that he will probably continue to do in future Dragon Ball things. Something very essential to Dragon Ball. So guys, I hope that you've learned something from this video, and as always guys, I'm Blackenfist. This has been the Birds and the Bees of Dragon Ball.
While we're talking about Saiyans, we should go deeper into the word Saiyan itself. We already know that most Saiyans are named after vegetables, but the word Saiyan also has a connection to vegetable as well. Okay, dude, what the fuck?